Welcome back to the Infinite Jungle. On today's episode, this is a ACD After Hours edition of the episode with Pari and Marius. Hi, Pari. Hi, Marius. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
You guys look really cute. Just together in the same shot. It's really adorable. For my listeners who don't know, Pari is part of the ETH Panda Ops team at the Ethereum Foundation. Marius is part of the Geth team at the Ethereum Foundation. We are going to be talking about the state of Ethereum protocol development. The good, the bad, the ugly. There's so much to catch up on, especially related to how Pectra has been going. The Holesky testnet failure, Sepolia very recently. So we'll get started. But before we get started with the show, as per usual, here is a quick show disclaimer. I need to remind you to please refer to the disclaimer linked in the podcast show notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice, an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. So, Pari and Marius, the first thing I want to ask you guys about is the fact that both testnets, Sepolia and Holesky, required major fixes in clients. Both testnets did not go well. I think this is a first for Ethereum upgrade history.
It's not.
It's not.
Unfortunately,
We broke 3 out of 3 testnets for the merge, just saying.
3 out of 3 testnets for the merge.
Yep.
Yes.
We broke 3 out of 3 for the merge, 1 out of 2 for withdrawals, and 1 out of 2 for blobs. I think 2 out of 2 for blobs, actually.
Not the public testnets. Or what? Are you talking about public testnets?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that this was kind of a first in Ethereum history.
No, testnets are for testing, and that's what we did.
Yeah. I think what's different is how the ecosystems evolved. So when we broke the merge testnets, pretty much no one really cared, especially because one of them, Gurley, was already slated for deprecation. So people honestly didn't care when something went wrong. However, the world now looks a lot different. We have a bunch of staking providers. We have a bunch of L2s, etc., that are actually actively using this testnets as their staging environment. And I think that's why we notice a much bigger need to keep it working perfectly. And I think a lot of the reaction is sort of this difference between how much we expect to support testnets versus how much everyone else expects to support testnets. So much so that we followed the Arbitrum announcements channel. And last night, after Sepolia was fixed, we also got an announcement or a message from Arbitrum saying that their staging environment on Sepolia is working perfectly again. And for me, that was like, damn, this is it's really serious to have a testnet go down now, as opposed to 2 years ago, where honestly it wasn't a big deal if something went wrong.
That's good color. I was quite concerned, I guess, at my confidence level in the readiness of Pectra was like heavily impacted by the fact that both testnets resulted in such major network disruptions. Would you say that the ecosystem and from like the developer's point of view, your confidence level in Pectra's readiness hasn't changed because of what has happened?
For the Sepolia, it definitely hasn't changed. Sepolia's issue was because we're using a custom deposit contract on Sepolia that will never happen on mainnet, and it was quite clear that this is like a one-off thing because the test chain is not the same as mainnet. For Holesky, it's the initial bug is basically the same. We were using a different configuration because we were using it. The deposit contract was deployed on a different address, and so this would also have not been able to break mainnet. The problem, the big problem that we are seeing on Holesky is due to another issue. And that only came up because we finalized the incorrect. Sorry, we justified
Justify the invalids.
the invalid chain, and so a lot of nodes have to move to the correct chain now, and that has shown us a bunch of issues in the consensus clients that need to be addressed before we go to mainnet.
Exactly. So I think the larger takeaway from Holesky is it's not necessarily a Pectra incident. It's more of an overall, we need to be fixing this on Ethereum incident. And it's not that we haven't tested some of these parts, we've just never stressed it to this degree. So, a simple examples in November, we did these rounds of non-finality testnets, and even in the conclusions, we already had the notion that peering is really difficult during non-finality. We need to figure this out. However, even in my worst case estimation, there we expected about 10% of the chain to be live, so there's something to sync to and something to achieve. However, what happened on Holesky is the three major clients all had a bug, and they had different bugs. However, they agreed on what the output should be, and because they agreed on what the output should be, and there were effectively very few slash no validators running Reth and Ericon who didn't have the bug on Holesky, there was no chain. There was like, I don't know, a grand total of 5 slots over a couple of hours. So it's like 99% plus of the chain just suddenly vanished, right? So that exasperated whatever problems we sort of knew we had, and then it gets tangled up in this additional discussion of we justified an invalid state. How are we going to look at this, or how are we going to figure this out if this was to happen on mainnet? So we tried approaching the problem as much as possible with this is how we would deal with the issue on mainnet. This is a great experiment, let's try this out. However, it I think was quite quickly apparent that we're going to need a bunch of fixes on the CL side. Um, Client teams rushed to get those fixes. We wanted to try and get finality up ASAP, and that wasn't immediately possible. So it just led to this cycle of okay, we're going to need the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and that's I think why it also dragged on for a bit longer. And I mean, to add a bit of color, right? We mentioned that in the past, like the merge testnet, etc., they all failed, but they were all restored within like a matter of a day, and we got better and better at it. And I think Sepolia is kind of our standard incident response. Within an hour, we had identified the bug, we had patched it, we even did a mitigation. However, someone from the community figured out what mitigation we did and tried to exploit it in their own way, naively, I guess. So then we had to coordinate a time when all the validators would be online and patch the fix. It happened. It was a couple of hours. I think the bug lasted from like 9 to 2 p.m., something around that, 9 to 4 p.m., whatever. And I'd say about half a day to fix an issue is not too bad, especially when we actually fixed it within an
Way
hour.
earlier. Yeah.
The deployment takes longer because you want to coordinate people. People have to get up online. No one has like round the clock incidents response for a test net. So I think that's more indicative of how incidents have looked like in the past. Whereas with Holsky, there's still problems, there's still discussions, there's still whatever. It's just they aren't related to Pectra. They're related to the consensus layer in general.
Yeah, and they're still related to, like, protocol health.
Exactly. And protocol hardening. And it's bringing up these discussions of why aren't we spending more time hardening the protocol? Why aren't we, like, why haven't there been these incidents responses in the past? Why? There's like a lot of other deeper discussions there. But I don't think a lot of them are particularly related to Pectra as an upgrade itself.
Yeah, but like when we see an issue, when we
Yeah.
see a bug, we are going to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think this is even in the very like the patches that the clients are currently doing, they will most likely, hopefully, never happen on mainnet, never be executed on mainnet. But it's still very important that we have them.
Yeah.
That if ever something similar would happen on mainnet, that we have these patches, that we have the incident response, and also I think we have on the consent on the execution layer we've had these moments quite often where like a testnet would break or a chain would break. We even had like mainnet issues every now and then, consensus issues every now and then. So on the execution layer, we kind of have a lot of tools on how to find issues when an issue happens, how to debug those issues quickly, how to make sure that like clients are following the correct chain. We have a bunch of flags in the clients where you can say, okay, I know because I'm coordinating with everyone else that this is the correct chain, so please follow this chain. But after the merge, the execution layer client is not the one who tells the node how to which chain to follow, and so I think the consensus layer needs some of this expertise that we had like this dormant experience that we had on the execution layer, in order to fix and find and fix these issues on mainnet if they would ever happen.
Yeah. I think one of the downsides of the consensus layer is that in the last 4 years, we've had one incident, which means these are just muscles that haven't been exercised as often. Whereas in the execution layer, there's happens quite a lot more. And I think the takeaway is that A, we need to improve our incident response approaches. That is ground zero. A lot of stuff could have been communicated better. We could have coordinated better. We could have had estimations more public, presented, and so on. All of that stuff will be fixed. One of the takeaways for us as a team is to come up with an actual incident response playbook. But the second one is that we can no longer ignore the fact that we need to do a lot more protocol hardening related testing. It's a takeaway we already had with the non-finality testnets in November. However, the idea there was let's wait until Pectra's done. We have a bit more breathing room. We can figure stuff out post Pectra. And I think it just happened at a horrible time. Maybe if we had gotten to that range of testing earlier, we would have already figured these edge cases out. There's nothing inherently broken on Holesky that we couldn't have done on a private DevNet before. That it's very, or I mean, some peering related bugs maybe we wouldn't have caught, but by and large, we could have mitigated the problem by doing a lot more off-brand protocol hardening testing.
But this is just the non-finality issue. This is not the like the configuration
Yes,
issue
exactly.
that.
That's something I don't think we could have caught. There was initially, I think, talk about why didn't we do a Holesky shadow fork? Would it have caught this? The issue is that a Holesky shadow fork uses a custom genesis. So a lot of clients, not every client, treat it as a custom DevNet. So there, it's absolutely the same as DevNet 5, DevNet 6, DevNet 7, whatever. So it doesn't trigger these config code parts that actually had the bug.
During our normal testing, we do trigger these for mainnet. We trigger these code paths
Mhm.
during the tests that we write. But yeah, that's why it could have never happened on mainnet because that was actually covered by our tests. It was just for the other predefined networks. The first issue was could only have happened there.
Yeah.
It seems like from what you guys have been saying, like a convergence of a bunch of issues, like the protocol hardening that you guys had wanted to do in November but pushed back, the uniqueness of the Holeshki testnet and the Sepolia testnet and the way those deposit contracts work, on top of just all of the other kind of bugs and edge cases that you guys were trying to really make sure is is fully kind of complete in Pectra as well, and all of those efforts kind of converging into this big spectacular kind of like testnet failure that has happened on Holeshki, but then also Sepolia. I mean, I hear you on the learnings of takeaways. Does this mean that there should be like one priority that is higher than others before you guys focus back on Pectra? In that there, one of the things that I'm thinking about right now is there were very unique qualities that developers didn't catch about Holesky and Sepolia? Are there unique characteristics about Ethereum mainnet that perhaps developers won't catch this time because, again, these test nets or these networks work differently, and there are clearly fixes in and high priority fixes for events like non-finality that client teams are focusing on and working on now, but they're also working on Pectra. And so, yeah, I guess my question is like, how are you guys thinking about reprioritizing what's important and thinking about mainnet preparation in light of what's happened on these test nets? Because you say that it won't happen on mainnet. They're unique problems, but they're also unique problems that developers just didn't catch, didn't think about. And I'm sure mainnet has its own unique characteristics that in the very recent months, developers have had to issue hot fixes. Geth has to issue a hot fix this year for their mainnet client. Last year in December, it was, the gas limit constraints on the consensus layer that not many people knew about. It's all it seems like it's all converging. All of these incidents are happening at much closer timelines to each other.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
To be honest, this kind of stuff has also happened in the past.
Yeah.
It was just not maybe not publicized as much.
I think the most fun example I have was exactly a year ago, when Denkun was already slated. I think Denkun went live, 11th March, something like that, roughly. In January, 3 consecutive Sundays, we had 3 mainnet incidents: one in Nethermind, one in Bezu, and one in, I don't remember which other client. And we dealt with it. These were mainnet incidents. We dealt with it ASAP. There were hot fixes, there were patches, and so on. I think the argument is that there will always be periods where there's probably more happening and periods where there's less happening. Maybe just there's a lot more light shining on these issues right now, but the fact is, kind of, they've been happening, um, actually less than they used to, I would say.
Yes, and I think for Geth specifically, we just updated the code to another major version a couple of months ago, and that is our 15th major version, and an update to the major version just usually has a bunch of issues. That is something that is kind of expected, and so that's why we've been issuing a few hot fixes. I think 2 or 3 hot fixes after we bumped the major version. But we wanted to do this in order to burn in this major version for mainnet, and that's what we've done. Like, we found issues because we've updated this version earlier than we expected, and yeah, the good part about this massive bump was that we've added a lot of new functionality. We also removed a lot of functionality. I think that is something that we're currently in the process of, because we are like 3 years after the merge now,
Yeah.
2 years after the merge. We have a bunch of functionality in the client that we still have to maintain for pre-merge stuff, and we're slowly getting rid of some, so we can focus on shipping faster in the future and shipping more secure, because we have less code under that we still need to update, and then that we still need to maintain, and so we can really focus on the future of Ethereum.
And the focus in terms of the future, is it still is the focus still on shipping upgrades like Pectra, Fusaka, scaling faster, or is the focus on hardening the resiliency of Ethereum so that in, very edge case scenarios like non-finality, client teams are built? Or is it to make sure that testnets, which stakeholders now rely on far more than perhaps they have in the past, to make sure that these testnets are as staging environments rather than environments to break, which it does kind of seem like developers were in in the camp of thinking that these test nets were more okay to break, and
because they are for us.
Yes.
Like we've always treated them as something that we want to break. Like we want to test in a way that maybe we break the test net, because that gives us validation that this is not going to happen on mainnet. So we're running a lot of tests when these upgrades go live on the test net. We're running a lot of tests that we've developed over the years, also on these test nets, in order to see if we can find some edge cases that we didn't think about. But
Also, I like the fact that we're breaking the test nets, because if we're breaking an app staging environment, then they also learn about an edge case that they might not have known. And if push comes to shove and we have an issue on mainnet, at least we know that they fixed it. And if not, they know how to deal with the scenario. It should never be that the first time something happens, that it happens on mainnet. That would be the absolute worst scenario for me. If a test net goes down, that's fine. It's a test net. No one's losing money. No one's losing sleep over this. It's okay. We will fix it. We'll get it back to the stage where it's usable. But if mainnet were to go down, that's horrible. We should never break anything on mainnet for the first time.
yeah,
I
well,
think
we did lose some sleep,
yeah,
but
yeah,
not
we
much.
did lose some sleep, but not as much as if mainnet were to have issues. I mean, that's absolutely game-changing level of incident response over
Yeah,
there. And I
and
think it's also good that we have these edge cases in Holesky. Now we know that we need a new incident response playbook. We're going to have it. And if, for example, there's an issue on mainnet, we're going to have a way better response than we did before.
and like that's the thing. Like we've seen other ecosystems have similar issues all the time, but on their mainnet.
Yeah.
And like for their mainnet to go down, or to stop producing blocks, to stop finalizing. So I think we're being as safe as we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are things that we need to improve, definitely. And I think a lot of coordination. Coordination is going really good on the execution layer. We know who is kind of responsible, who are the people in the teams that are usually debugging issues when they come up. And I think this is something that is now known on the consensus layer as well.
Yeah.
But I think the capabilities have, yeah, they have to be improved. And I
And I
think,
think there's also just one minor note. I think with execution layer devs, the time zone diff is actually quite small, whereas in consensus layer devs, the time zone diff is huger. It might seem like a very minor thing, but it does actually make a material difference when there's an issue if you can rely on someone to respond in a matter of minutes or a matter of hours. And that being said, to your earlier point, we want to ship faster, we want to ship more securely. How do we get there, right? One of the things that has become quite apparent is we do need to be prototyping features more in parallel. So we're not finished with Pectra and then starting with Fusaka. And a simple example is PureDAS devnets already exist, EOF devnets already exist, we're already testing them, and so on, while Pectra is being tested as well. And the argument I'm trying to put forward is maybe we need to just have a new line of protocol hardening devnets. So the same way you have Fusaka and PureDAS, you also dedicate a portion of dev time for every client team to just harden the protocol. And in order to organize time a bit better, maybe sometimes that implies we're breaking the EL, and sometimes that implies we're breaking the CL, so that different teams can prioritize different stuff. But I like to see it as this is a feature we need to be shipping alongside other stuff. And it could be that there's no EIP that comes out of this. That's fine. Even the simple fact that we know, hey, we need this flag, we need this tool to get this better update, we need whatever, that's already enough, I think. Or we need to ship a peer to peer change, and maybe that requires a fork. It would be great to learn that. I think we just haven't prioritized protocol hardening as a feature, and I think we need to. It's gotten to the stage where we really need to.
Yeah. Another priority that will be thrown into the arena of Ethereum's protocol governance process
Yeah.
that
Well, I don't think there's too much that needs to go in the governance process, which I actually like. So, peer to peer changes, for example, often aren't required in a fork. You do them off band because there's a versioning system in place. So, either all the peers understand the new version or you continue using the old version. Eventually, all of them understand the new version. Sort of this soft fork idea. Um, the API changes. You don't need a fork for this. The ability for a client to import a non-finalized state. You don't need a fork for this. So the new flags that Marius was saying, where you can specify which fork to choose if there's two forks, doesn't need to be done at a hard fork boundary. There's probably something we're missing that does need to be done at a hard fork boundary, but I would say a good 80-90% of these would not need to be done at a hard fork. It's not going to be part of the governance process. It will be a part of the discussion process, but it isn't something that every client has to do. It's also fine if four out of the five clients say they would add an API that does this, and one dissents and say they're not going to do it. It's fine.
yeah, it is, um forks can be very good forcing functions in getting resources dedicated to initiatives. However, I hear you that client teams have more resources to some client teams, and in general, there's I think decision making is getting a bit faster on these calls, and while the time is limited on calls, I have been seeing more effort to take certain discussions offline from the calls and make decisions there. And some client teams can move ahead with it; others can take their time, be more flexible. I want to ask a question about how developers assess mainnet readiness in lieu of testnets. So I agree. I mean, not that I agree, but I hear you that the understanding is that these testnets are for breaking. And to be clear, the upgrade process, usually when you get to a public testnet, it's like the final kind of check boxes before you move to mainnet. You guys have blazed through some Holesky and Sepolia, and the next step is now potentially a clone of Holesky and trying to get Holesky up. I mean, without the kind of like barometer of how the public testnets went, like how are you guys gonna assess when picture's ready?
Yeah.
Yes. So the to be clear, the testnets did not break because of Pectra related stuff. It was like these configuration issues, and that's also why when Holeshki broke, we didn't stop the fork on Sepolia because we knew Sepolia will not break with the because of the same error. Um, and so when that's what we take that's what we strongly take into consideration. Like, why did this network actually break? Is this something related to Pectra? It wasn't. And so we could have spent probably a month longer on testing and would have never found these configuration issues because that was already in the client. We are also working on a way of verifying the configurations for testnets, so that these kind of issues will not happen in the future. Similar to how we currently do it for the networking, we have the fork ID. It's a technical mechanism for us to verify that all of the clients are activating the fork on the same block. And we are currently in the process of specifying something similar for the for configurations. So things like this will never happen again.
I think the part that is missing, however, is public ability to test a lot of the Pectra features. So imagine your Lidos, imagine your Coinbases, imagine whoever solo staker has a validator. Um, there they've now lost the ability to test their setup because Holesky still has problems. And that's what we're trying to figure out right now. So there is one push again to get Holesky to finalize, to resolve a lot of the problems. Um, I think when ACD happened, Holesky was at roughly 35% participation. Right now, it's hovering around 50, 55. Let's see if we're able to manage to get it up to 66. That would be amazing, because that basically means
Resolved.
we've resolved the immediate problems, and then we still have to have long-term fixes, a lot of discussions. It will take time, but it'll unblock all the staking providers, the RPC providers, etc., in terms of their testing timelines, because they have to do this as well, and public individuals who want to test their staking setups. So, in case we're not able to for whatever reason, then we came to consensus on ACD that we'd likely do a Holesky shadow fork. I had written a document that outlines about 4 different options, and the purpose of this Holesky shadow fork, or whatever option that we end up with, is that we give this location for the public to test their stuff on, and for us to test the stuff on, our stuff on. We need a really big network. It needs to be running for a few weeks. It needs to have certain parameters and so on that make it useful for testing. So we chose the Holesky shadow fork approach because all your dependency contracts, etc., will already exist on this shadow fork. And I think that is the more important conversation. Like, the external parties do need time to test this stuff. In an ideal world, Hosky went perfectly. They would have had a couple of weeks to test stuff. If not this week, the next week we could have already figured stuff out and already figured out a mainnet timeline. However, right now we need to take a step back. We need to provide them this testing location. Either this testing location is achieved by fixing Holesky or an alternate location. They need to go through their cycles. We're going to engage with them, make sure they have their PC stack, see if we can help with Oracle, see if we can help with anything, make sure that they finish their testing, make sure the client teams have finished their testing. We'd likely do a mainnet shadow fork. We'd likely do a couple more stress tests that client teams might have noticed. And I feel like once those steps have been completed, there's not much more we can do to assure that mainnet is secure, because we would have gone through multiple stages of ensuring things have gone well. If, of course, any of these steps fail, then we need to again take a step back, fix it, understand why it broke, redo the step, and so on.
It sounds like there's still quite a few steps between now and mainnet. Given that the first two steps or the last couple steps didn't go according to plan, and I hear you that Pectra readiness perhaps is not the best term because we're talking about the readiness of of the ecosystem, like you said, Pari, of stakeholders. But I think we're also talking about the readiness of client teams just to upgrade Ethereum at all. Like you said, the resilience of being able to handle states of non-finality, the flags to be able to double check like deposit contract misconfigurations. That not be related to Pectra EIPs, but it is related just to, is everyone ready to upgrade Ethereum again for like the 15th or 16th time? Like, are we ready to do another hard fork backwards incompatible upgrade? And the size of Ethereum's ecosystem, the growing complexity of, this is a new consensus layer, relatively new from execution layer clients. There's not as much tooling. There's things that you guys are working out. More client teams are coming on. It just seems as though the readiness of Ethereum to upgrade is getting a little bit harder. The bar is getting higher and higher. Is that the perspective that you guys share? And if so, does that mean that Ethereum perhaps can upgrade faster? That actually, like, Ethereum will upgrade slower because of this?
I think not because of this, but I think there's it's generally well understood that we're currently at a pretty quick speed, and we might be a bit quicker in the future. But at some point, we will come to an inflection point where Ethereum will upgrade slower because there's so much value on Ethereum. There's so much being built on Ethereum. So many things built on top of protocols on top of Ethereum. So much stuff on the L2s, and everything needs to be tested. Everything needs to be figured out. And yeah, there will be the point where Ethereum will slowly maybe ossify is a term that's used quite often. I don't think like I think Ethereum.
I don't think we're there yet,
Yes,
but yes. Yeah.
Ethereum has a purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like Ethereum wants to bring back power to the people. It wants to enable everyone to transact without
Permissionlessly.
permissionlessly. It wants to be decentralized. It wants to be secure, and we're clearly not like we're clearly not there yet. There needs to be so much done until we can have trustless private transactions for less than 5 cents, so that we can provide the value for everyone in the whole world who wants to use this ecosystem. And so until we get there, we still have to upgrade the chain. And once we get there, or well, once we get closer, the frequency of updating of upgrading will be slower, and the amount of testing and the amount of security and the amount of discussion of where Ethereum will need to go to will increase. But I think the thing is, after the merge, we massively increased our testing ability. There was there was one case I remember for the London hard fork. We were basically done with the hard fork, and then we waited around 6 months for the testing team, which was one person at the time, to finally publish the tests, so we can be sure that the tests are good. Now we have a very competent testing team that has been cranking out tests left and right, trying to cover all of the edge cases that these things that we ship, and just like the size of Pectra is incredible compared to other upgrades. We're doing a lot of new stuff. We are doing, for example, the requests in the header and the requests. This whole request mechanism is something completely new that we've never done before, which includes like passing logs, something a technique that we've never done before. And so doing these kind of new conceptual things for the first time also involves a bunch of edge cases that we haven't thought about. We didn't really think about that the deposit address is different between the test nets and mainnet. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like this is a bug that is part of the
Testnet.
testnet.
Yeah.
Like the testnet should have been started with the same contract at the same address,
Yeah.
and then we wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah.
But
I think part of the learning was also when, so we used the Gurley testnet for the merge, and Gurley was not made with the idea of supporting apps properly, etc. It was meant to be like a smaller scale thing. So we always used to have funding issues. So the learning from that example was that we need to start regularly restarting testnets to serve a new purpose, right? So when we deployed Holesky, we had no idea that we're going to be doing this sort of execution, message requests, etc. Holesky was literally spun up with the idea that we need to have a really large network that the CLs can test on. That was its only purpose. However, now the upgrade has gone in a direction where Holsky is not the most suited type of testnet to have done it. And it was just that the things like where the deposit contract is didn't really matter. Like it could have been at any address, but suddenly now it does matter. So I think one of the learnings we had from the team is from the next time we're probably going to stick to as many mainnet parameters as possible. The exception might be the Sepolia contract because there's no other way to do token gating or like validator permission validator deposits. But yeah, other than that, the learning we had is we're probably just going to stick to mainnet values. That's just way easier, more straightforward. It's just that when we came up with these test nets, that wasn't a requirement. And I don't think it was that big a deal if we broke a test net either. But clearly, the learning is that we've gotten to a stage where it is a big deal if we break a test net, and we probably shouldn't be doing it that often
yeah.
without
Yeah, in the past
longer.
we
Yeah.
regularly broke testnets, and we also regularly just deprecated testnets
Yeah.
because it was clear like testnets used to be for the client teams to test.
Yeah.
And so if a testnet reached like 100 gigabyte, which is incredibly big
Yeah.
for us, because whenever we need to test something, we want to quickly spin up a node, sync the whole testnet, and then do some transactions or
Yeah.
just verify that we can synchronize the chain. Or we want to test, or we want to benchmark a speed improvement and see like how much faster is this node compared to this node. And these things you cannot do with a big testnet. So in the
Yeah.
past, we like regularly
Regularly we said them.
deprecated and just shut off our nodes to testnets.
One other thing I do want to mention though, the Gnosis chain, for example, also runs a version that is very similar to what Ethereum mainnet has. They do change some parameters and some configs. And the Chiado testnet on the Gnosis chain actually had the same was using the same style of contracts that we do on Sepolia. So if they had forked a day before us, they would have caught it, or we would have caught it, which and thankfully Sepolia happened before. We caught the bug, we fixed it, and the next day the Chiado testnet successfully forked. We're also in touch with the Gnosis testing team. They're doing all the Pectra testing on their side as well. So it feels like the benefit of Ethereum growing. Until now, we've spoken about the downsides of it growing, right? That now a lot more people rely on it and so on. But the benefit is now we also have an ecosystem of people who are doing the tests on our behalf. Chiado has forked. They are doing the testing. Pectra was successful on their chain. And that is a learning that we also need to take. If they had caught the bug before us, then Sepolia would have been successful because the other way around, they are successful. And hopefully, Gnosis chain forks before mainnet. And maybe that's another data point for us, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like there are some benefits that we're not really using. And we probably should lean more into using.
Yeah. These are good learnings. I definitely did not think about the Sepolia and the Holesky testnet incidents in this way, but hearing you guys express the many learnings that have come out of these events, it is more optimistic, I will say, than I expected. And I think that and I think that public testnets in general, when I think about like older testnets like Ropsten and Gwirly and some of the ones that were just for Ethereum during proof of work merge state, now there are these public testnets are far more. There's so much more like players, I guess, on the Holeshki and the Sepolia testnets, but they're still relatively new. They're nascent
Yeah.
testnets that haven't been around for most of Ethereum's history, and I can
I
see
think
how in the
Sequoia is
future.
actually around 3 years now. It's actually it goes into deprecated state next year, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
They're getting old now.
And Holesky is even younger, right?
Yeah, 2 years at this point, two
Yeah.
and a half, I think.
And the idea is that hopefully we'll have not just the devs and the client teams spinning up public test nets for everyone to use, but like you said, hopefully more test nets for, say, like the stakeholders, like the staking pools being spun up by different actors in the Ethereum ecosystem, which would
Exactly.
make
In an
things more
ideal
resilient.
world, everyone has their own testing team, everyone has their own testing stack. They do it, they find bugs that we don't find, we find bugs they don't find, and Ethereum's better for it.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing right now, right?
Yeah.
Like these, that's why we want to provide a new test net, or the Holeshki Shadow Fork,
Yeah.
because we also want not only the pools and staking providers to test their software, but in testing their software, they are also directly testing the Pectra features,
Yeah.
right? Because they're using it in their distributed validator contracts or whatever they're doing on chain. I have no idea. um, but yeah, that is the benefit of a test net. You are testing your stuff, they are testing their stuff, and we are testing the interaction between our things, and that is the benefit of having people on our testnet as well.
Also, there was one data point I actually forgot. For the doom and gloom, the ephemery testnet was the first one to fork. It's been over 2, 3 weeks now. No bugs reported.
Yeah.
It has Pectra, it's worked. I think the next reset also happens in like a week. So it isn't all doom and gloom, is what I also want to point out. I think the
I've
issue
been
is very often when something goes wrong, you hear about it a lot more when something goes right.
Yeah.
Because what is the reporting there? If Emery went well, testing is going as scheduled. Not that many people are interested to hear about that. Whereas Holesky horribly crashed, devs are running to fix it. That's way more engaging. People want to listen to that.
Yeah. And
All
I
right.
I, I've been very hopeful about the future of Ethereum, especially this last week.
Yeah.
We've sat together. We talked about a lot of the issues that we see in Ethereum,
Yeah.
and I think that we're on a really good way to fix not only some of the technical stuff, but also some of the process stuff.
And
And
I think that's also the nice thing about Ethereum. I no way want to be just optimistic, la la la, everything is perfect.
mm,
There's clearly a lot of work we have to do. There's clearly bugs we need to fix, but nothing feels fundamentally broken to me.
yes.
There are problems we need to solve, yes. There are clear paths forward to fix said problems, which is a great first sign. We definitely have to get better at communicating, and that's also why we were immediately happy to do this because it helps people know where our heads are at. But I think that's the nice thing about Ethereum. We're hopefully optimistic.
Thank you
and,
guys for
and you
enlightening
can get
me.
involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was doom and gloom, but yeah, no, I hear you guys. I hear you guys. My views are changing. One question to the point of just other things with Ethereum and your guys' optimism of just generally Ethereum's future. While Pectra has been going on, there's been a ton of changes with the Ethereum Foundation. New team leads, new executive directors, new informal council advisory groups, new EF funded BD campaigns, research teams potentially. Yeah, I've just been like focused more on Petra because I feel like that and development, and I feel like that's the most important. But there's a lot of headline news that is just related to the organization, to the Ethereum Foundation. What do you guys make of it? What is your thoughts on what's going on with outside of protocol development?
Outside of protocol, it's a great question. I feel the and I think the Twitter sentiment and the sentiment of the community showed it. There were a few things that were not going as well as they could have. Um, we cannot really say anything, but I'm just saying I'm very hopeful for the future.
Yeah.
That was very vague, but
Um,
continue.
I feel like the point to take away is the community spoke up about issues with the EF and the EF reacted. Whether the reaction is good or not, time will tell. But I'm hopeful about how things are shaping up.
Okay,
And I
okay,
think
yeah.
that's the perfect way, right? If someone's saying you have a problem, the EF didn't say, we don't have a problem, we're going to go away and do things exactly the same. Instead, they embraced change. They made decisions that they probably didn't need to have all the time. And it feels like they're listening more, which is good.
That's good. That's good. Do you, in terms of your like the morale of the organization internally, how is everyone? Is everyone
I
doing
think it's
okay?
good.
Are you guys okay?
We're actually at an in-person event together.
Yeah, that's
Um,
why you're seeing us in the same screen.
yeah,
At
this
like
is
a banquet hall? It
yeah,
does
so
very
we had an
comfortable.
in-person event. We're figuring out a lot of things, also with how we want to do protocol testing, development, features, trying to unblock a lot of things, and being in person really helps with that. So I'm very optimistic.
I think I'm optimistic too. I'm optimistic too. Well, thank you so much, Pari and Marius, for the time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on Pectra, on Ethereum. It sounds like, yeah, communication is happening, and it sounds like a lot of improvements are in the pipeline. Very excited to see, of course, the upgrade go live at Pectra go live on mainnet. Very excited to see what's next for Ethereum's future in terms of, improvements to the development process. And it sounds like you guys are talking about all of that in real time, which is great. Um, yeah, any other thoughts you guys wanted to share before we end off the show?
Help us test.
Yes,
Try break stuff on ephemery.
get involved.
Yeah.
We're always looking for good people. We're always like, there was a person who kind of saw what we were doing, found the issue,
Yeah.
and like there were like the issue was triggered by transactions in the transaction pool, and we removed our transactions from the transaction pool, and this person sent a transaction to trigger the issue in the transaction pool. So people are with a lot of knowledge are out there, and they are trying to,
We'd
I don't
love
know.
to give you a chance to break
Yeah,
the protocol with us rather
yeah.
than against us.
And we're also doing, still doing, I think, the Pectra audit
Yes.
competition, where you can earn a lot of money for doing exactly this. I think up to 2 million, 2 million
Is the
USD.
payout exactly?
And
Step up when you see something isn't going as planned. Shout out to this person. I think it's Cat with a Hat on Discord.
Yes.
So I was on vacation when Holesky was happening, and I came back to a lot of things, discussions going on, and this person realized that no one had gone through making an incident response timeline. So just opened a Google Drive, made the incident response timeline. Whenever a client team would say, "This is how we want you to fix it," this person would immediately update the document. That was great to see. And we're probably going to adopt a similar approach. But I really loved the fact that some community member was like, what can I do? This is how I can help fix. This is what I'm going to do.
yes.
And yeah,
And
that's,
I think,
I want to see more of
yeah,
that. That's perfect.
I think that's the point of decentralization, right?
Yeah.
Like, the point of decentralization is everyone can step up. Everyone can be the person who helps us test, who helps us fix things, helps us debug, who helps annoy us if they think there's some
Yeah.
issue. So yeah, get involved. The bug bounties thing is
It
on.
goes on for a bit longer, and
Yes,
it's
Yeah, I'll
literally
link to it in the show notes.
perfect.
2 million. That's how much you could earn if you can break Pectra really
Yeah.
well.
And if you want to earn more than that over the lifetime of your career, then join the EF. We have a great testing team who's also always looking for good people. We have a security team,
Yes.
and we're currently looking for good people to get involved who are interested in these kind of things, who are interested in incidents response, so yeah, we're very happy to
Yeah.
have people show up and help us.
Yeah. And shout out to you, Marius and Pari, and all of the developers that are keeping Ethereum running, that are working tirelessly on this protocol, and also doing so with an attitude of wanting help, of accepting help, of not running away from hard questions, for being just so genuine and truthful and honest, because that kind of transparency is why people like Cat in the Hat can come to Discord and just jump in. Like, I think I agree with you that this is Ethereum's greatest strength is its decentralization, and it's this culture and this atmosphere that everybody can help out. This is not something that can be done in other ecosystems, and that's really unique to the way that covering protocol development, covering what happened on Holesky and Sepolia, everything was out in the open. Everything was happening in the public eye, and I think, yeah, like you said, Ethereum is better for it. So thank you guys for being who you guys are.
Thank you.
I know I can be hard sometimes, but I do genuinely support you guys,
I know we're
and love what you
asking these questions,
Yeah,
and we need to have a platform to also discuss these things. And I think that's all very fair. It's
yeah.
part of the process.
And I think like sometimes the crypto journalism can be quite tough and quite like under researched and I think not really fair. And I think it's great that you're also like giving us the opportunity
Yeah.
to respond. And I would like to see that more from crypto media, because they're a lot of them are chasing the big headlines, and it's fine to have a big headline, but I think you kind of like in the end you're doing journalistic stuff, and so you should behave like journalists and give us the ability to give our viewpoint and let your reader decide whether
Yeah.
they want to follow it or whether they think that we don't have a point here. But
Yeah, exactly. I hope we made our case relatively well.
100%. Yeah. I'm Thank you for presenting your guys' case, on this show. I hope a lot of people will listen to this episode, and I know for me, my views have changed on how I view what happened on the Holesky and Sepolia testnets because of this conversation. So yes, thank you guys. Thank you, Pari and Marius. Thank you to everyone who is listening to another episode of the Infinite Jungle. We hope that you learned something new about Ethereum. In your explorations of the infinite jungle that is Ethereum, stay safe out there.